Nancy Pelosi pointed her finger and called Tulsi Gabbard a Russian asset who should be in prison on live television. But she didn't realize the combat veteran sitting across the room brought a manila envelope that would permanently destroy her 40-year legacy in exactly 2 hours. Director Gabbard, you are a Russian asset. You met with Assad. You betrayed our Democratic Party. You serve a fascist president who sent the National Guard against American children. You should be in prison, not subpoenaing the longest-serving speaker in modern American history. Nancy Pelosi pointed her finger across the Senate hearing room, the same hand that had just sworn an oath on a Bible 10 minutes earlier. Adam Schiff sat next to her, nodding solemnly. Tulsi Gabbard did not move. Combat journal in her left hand, manila envelope on the table. Big mistake. What happened in the next 2 hours ended Nancy Pelosi's legacy on live C-SPAN. Smash that like button right now. Subscribe. Comment, subpoena. You are about to witness the cleanest political destruction in modern American hearing history. Hart Senate Office Building, Hearing Room 216, 1000, on a Tuesday morning in April. C-SPAN was live. Fox News was live. The galleries had filled at 7. Half the audience wore AOC pins and union shirts. The other half were veterans, Capitol Police widows, and 3 former intelligence officers who had resigned during the first Trump term and quietly returned during the second. Senator Tom Cotton sat at the center of the dais. To his left, the witness table where Nancy Pelosi had just been sworn in. 85 years old, cream Armani pantsuit, a single strand of 26 pearls she had worn for 30 years. Adam Schiff sat beside her as personal counsel. To Cotton's right, the second witness table, Tulsi Gabbard, 44, charcoal pantsuit, combat boots under the trouser cuffs, ODNI lapel pin, a small leather field journal in her left hand that had ridden in her ruck across 2 deployments, a manila envelope sealed with the seal of the Director of National Intelligence in her right. Beside her sat Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. 3 weeks earlier, Tulsi had declassified the Inspector General files behind the 2019 impeachment of Donald Trump. The files showed the whistleblower complaint had been built on second-hand evidence and politically biased witnesses. The Senate Select Committee on Intelligence had subpoenaed Pelosi, the speaker who launched the impeachment, and granted Tulsi cross-examination authority. Pelosi's mouth had tightened when Cotton said the word cross-examination. "Madam Speaker," he said, "you may begin with your opening statement." She took the microphone with both hands. For the next 9 minutes, she spoke with the cadence she had used in 50 years of press conferences. The cadence of a woman who knew how to land a line on the evening news. The cadence of a woman who, until that morning, had never sat in a witness chair under oath in her life. She called Donald Trump the Mussolini of Mar-a-Lago. She called the Republican Party a death cult, dressed up in a flag. She said the Trump Department of Justice had been weaponized against her, against Senator Schiff, against every American who had voted against him. She said the second Trump administration had begun a campaign of political revenge unprecedented in American history. Then she turned slowly to face Tulsi Gabbard. "Director Gabbard," she said, "I want to be very clear about who you are." She did not blink. "You are not a credible figure in the intelligence community. You spent the last decade defending Bashar al-Assad, a man who gassed his own children. You parroted Russian propaganda about Ukraine to the point that even Mitt Romney called you traitorous. The Senate barely confirmed you 52-48. Half this body considers you a national security risk." She lifted a single finger. "You met with Assad in 2017, secretly, without authorization from your party or your government. You promoted Edward Snowden, a man who stole classified materials and fled to Moscow. You sat on Tucker Carlson's couch and questioned whether American biolabs in Ukraine were producing bioweapons. You repeated Kremlin disinformation, word for word. The finger turned, pointed across the room. And now you have weaponized the office of the Director of National Intelligence to declassify documents selectively, conveniently, to attack the very institutions that protected this country from Donald Trump in 2019. Her voice rose. She had her audience. The progressive half of the gallery leaned in. You are a Russian asset who betrayed the Democratic Party. You met with a war criminal. You should be in prison. You should not be here questioning me. The American people see through this. History will see through this. Adam Schiff nodded. He had been nodding the entire time. A scattered burst of applause broke from the left side of the gallery before Cotton's gavel cut it down. Order in the room, Cotton said. Director Gabbard, you may proceed with cross-examination. Tulsi did not respond immediately. She looked at the manila envelope. She looked at Pelosi. The room held. When she spoke, her voice was quieter than Pelosi's had been. Madam Speaker, she said, I came here today not to debate. I came to read. She placed her right hand on the envelope and broke the seal. If you are watching this right now, stop scrolling. Hit subscribe. Comment subpoena in capital letters. You are about to see what happens when a soldier with a folder meets a politician under oath. Tulsi pulled the first photograph from the envelope and laid it on the witness table. She did not slide it toward Pelosi yet. She let the cameras find it first. It was a mugshot. Booking photo, State of California, Napa County Sheriff's Department. The man in the photograph was 82 years old. White hair. Disheveled in the way. Hair only gets disheveled at 300 inches the morning in the back of a squad car. The eyes were red. The booking number was visible across his chest. The man was Paul Pelosi. Pelosi recognized it before the camera operators did. Her hand went to her pearls. The first twist. Madam Speaker, Tulsi said, before we discuss the impeachment of 2019, I want to ask you a question about a different night. The 28th of May 2022. Do you remember where you were that night? I was abroad, Pelosi said. Where, Madam Speaker? A small pause. Brussels. And what were you doing in Brussels? I was meeting with NATO leadership, reaffirming American commitment to the rules-based international order. Could you describe what you ate that night, Madam Speaker? Schiff leaned forward. Mr. Chairman, the relevance of what the Speaker had for dinner. Tulsi did not look at Schiff. She looked at Pelosi. Madam Speaker, she said, I will tell you what you ate. The State Department per diem records show your delegation hosted a working dinner at the Cercle Royal Gaulois. The dinner included 6 courses. There was champagne. There were toasts. The dinner ended at 1,100 Brussels time. Tulsi paused. It was 200 inches the afternoon in Napa, California, when your dinner ended. Madam Speaker, what was happening in Napa, California, while you toasted with NATO? Pelosi did not answer. Madam Speaker, while you raised a glass with the Belgian foreign minister, your 2-year-old husband was in the back of a California Highway Patrol cruiser. He had been pulled out of the wreckage of a Porsche. The car was your car. He had been driving under the influence of alcohol. There was a passenger in the seat next to him. Tulsi let the word passenger sit for 2 seconds. The passenger was a woman. The passenger was not a member of your family. The passenger was not a member of your staff. The Napa County District Attorney's report, which is public record, identifies the passenger as, and I quote the document, a personal companion of the suspect, end quote. The progressive half of the gallery had gone very quiet. Madam Speaker, while you were in Brussels celebrating the rules-based international order, your husband was being arrested in Napa with another woman in your car. Pelosi's hand twisted the pearls twice. Director, this is a personal matter. My husband's medical situation, Madam Speaker. Tulsi turned the next photograph face up. It was the police report. The blood alcohol level was visible at the top of the page in red ink, 0.082, above the legal limit. The vehicle make Porsche 911. The location the intersection of Walnut Lane and Oakville Crossroad. The time 1012 inches the evening. The arresting officer's narrative noted that Paul Pelosi had attempted to show the officer a card identifying him as a Department of Defense contractor. He was not a Department of Defense contractor. He had no such authorization. The card was the kind of object a man brings out at 3 inches the morning when he is trying to avoid being booked. Madam Speaker, Tulsi said, your husband tried to flash a fake federal credential at a California state trooper to get out of a drunk driving arrest with another woman in the car. The silence in the room was the silence of an audience that had not known the woman in the car part. The Pelosi office had buried it for 4 years through a combination of media pressure, sealed records, and the simple fact that no one had wanted to be the reporter who asked. Schiff tried again. Mr. Chairman, the impeachment subpoena does not authorize. Tulsi turned to him for the first time. Her voice did not rise. Senator Schiff, the cross-examination authority granted by this committee covers any matter relating to the credibility of the witness. Drunk driving with a personal companion in the family vehicle of a sitting Speaker of the House while she conducts diplomacy in Brussels speaks to the credibility of the woman who launched an impeachment based on a phone call she never heard. Sir, please instruct your client to answer the question. Schiff opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Pelosi. Pelosi did not look at him. Cotton. The objection is overruled. Director Gabbard, please continue. Tulsi did not continue with Paul Pelosi. She moved. Madam Speaker, your husband was sentenced to 5 days in Napa County Jail. 5 days. The maximum sentence under the law you co-sponsored. The law you stood next to Mothers Against Drunk Driving and signed into existence in 2007, that maximum was 6 months. Tulsi pulled a third document. The construction worker in San Joaquin County, who was convicted of a first offense DUI in May of 2022, the same month as your husband, served 60 days. He lost his commercial driver's license for 1 year. He lost his job at the rendering plant. His wife filed for divorce in October. Their 2 children went to live with his mother in Stockton. He has not driven a truck since. His name is in the public court record. It is not in this folder because he is not the issue. The issue is your husband served 5 days. The construction worker served 60. The law was the same. She set the document down. Madam Speaker, tell this committee what kind of America has 2 sets of laws. One for the husband of the Speaker and one for the man who drives the truck. The pearls. Third twist. Pelosi's other hand reached for the water glass. The glass shook visibly. She did not drink. She set it back down. I cannot speak to sentencing decisions. That was the prosecutor's discretion. The prosecutor in Napa County, Madam Speaker, was your political donor. His campaign disclosure forms are in this folder. He received $14,000 from the Pelosi for Congress Committee between 2016 and 2022 in a county your husband had been arrested in, after his car had been wrecked there, after his name had been booked there. Pelosi closed her eyes for a half-second. The cameras caught it. Madam Speaker, the construction worker in Stockton did not have a political action committee. The gallery did not applaud. This was a hearing, but the woman with the Lebanon pin in the back row brought her hand to her mouth, and the veterans in the second row leaned forward in their chairs. If you are watching this right now, and you remember when this story broke, when the Pelosi office buried the woman in the passenger seat for 4 years, and the press let them comment the word husband in the comments Spell it out. Smash that like button right now. Subscribe and turn on notifications. There are 4 more folders in that envelope. The next one is heavier. Tulsi did not pause between rounds. She reached into the envelope and pulled the second folder, green. The seal at the top read, U.S. House of Representatives, Office of the Clerk Financial Disclosure Reports. Madam Speaker, we will turn to the question of how a public servant earning $174,000 a year accumulates a personal fortune in excess of $250 million. She opened the folder. There was no chart, no graph, no PowerPoint. There was a single piece of paper with a single sentence on it. She read the sentence. Madam Speaker, when you took your seat in the United States Congress in 1987, your family was worth $3 million. Today, your family is worth between $250 million and $400 million. The exact figure depends on how the Napa winery is valued. The silence in the room had a different quality now. It was the silence of 300 people doing math in their heads. Madam Speaker, tell this committee, how does that happen? Pelosi. My husband is a businessman. Paul has venture capital, real estate. Paul Pelosi runs Financial Leasing Services, a San Francisco firm, Tulsi said. The firm's primary income source is commercial real estate and stock trading, specifically call options on technology companies. Tulsi did not pull a list of trades. She did not list the companies. She pulled one photograph. It was a wide shot of a hillside in Napa Valley. Rows of vines stretching from the foreground to a sunset background. In the center of the image, a stone and redwood villa with a tile roof. The kind of house that ends up in Architectural Digest, under the headline, A Family's Legacy in Wine Country. This is your home in street. Helena, Madam Speaker, the Pelosi family vineyard, 10 acres purchased in 2009. The purchase price was $16 million. The current valuation is closer to 30. She pulled the second photograph. It was taken from approximately 12 inches above the sidewalk on Market Street, San Francisco. The camera angle was low because the photographer had been on his knees. The image showed a man in a green army field jacket sleeping on flattened cardboard. His boots were lined up neatly beside him. A small American flag had been tucked into the laces of one boot. The flag was the kind they hand out at military funerals. Madam Speaker, this is a man named Robert Holcomb. He is 78 years old. He served 2 tours in Vietnam. He was photographed by a freelance journalist on the corner of Market and 7th on the 18th of December 2025. 6 weeks ago. The journalist confirmed his identity through his VA record. Mr. Holcomb has lived on Market Street for 3 years. He sleeps within a 40-minute drive of your vineyard. Tulsi laid the 2 photographs side by side on the witness table. The villa above the vines, the veteran on the cardboard. She did not need to say anything else. The cameras did the work. The veterans in the second row of the gallery were no longer leaning forward. They were sitting very still. Madam Speaker, 6,000 human beings sleep on the streets of your district tonight. Your district has the highest per capita homelessness rate of any congressional district in the United States. The public charity records show that you and your husband donated $3 million to homeless services across a 3-8-year career. That figure is 1% of your net worth. The average American household, the families you say you fight for, gives 2.1%. The working folks in your own district give more proportionally than you do. Schiff started to lean toward his microphone. Tulsi turned to him before he reached it. Senator Schiff, your own financial disclosure shows a net worth of $16 million accumulated on a congressional salary, including a $1 million home in Burbank. You purchased 4 months after voting on motion picture industry tax credits. Sir, I have a folder for you. It is in this envelope. It is not on today's agenda, but if you intervene one more time, I will open it. Schiff sat back. He did not sit back the way an attorney sits back when an objection has been overruled. He sat back the way a man sits back when he understands for the first time in a long time that he is in the wrong room. The gallery noticed. So did the cameras. So did Cotton, who allowed himself 1/2 second of expression before suppressing it. Tulsi turned back to Pelosi. Madam Speaker, in 1987, you stood on this floor and said, I quote your maiden speech, I came here to fight for the working families of San Francisco, end quote. She tapped the photograph of Robert Holcomb in his Army field jacket on the cardboard. This is a working family, Madam Speaker. He worked for 31 years as a longshoreman after he came home from Vietnam. His pension was lost when the Longshoremen's Fund collapsed in 2008. He has been waiting 14 years for federal pension protection legislation. The Pension Protection Act of 2022, which would have restored his payments, passed the Senate 68-32. It died in the House because you, Madam Speaker, would not bring it to a vote. The reason given by your office at the time was, I quote your communications director, scheduling conflicts with end-of-session business, end quote. Tulsi closed the green folder. Madam Speaker, the man on the cardboard is the working family you came here to fight for. The villa in the photograph is what you fought for instead. The pearls. Fourth twist. One pearl pulled loose from the thread. It hung by the silk, swinging slightly. Pelosi did not see it. The water glass shook again. This time, she did not reach for it. With all due respect, Director, Paul makes those investment decisions. Madam Speaker, Tulsi said quietly, Paul Pelosi has a community college degree from the University of San Francisco. He retired from financial leasing services in 2017. The trades have continued since his retirement. The trades have continued during the months he has been recovering from a hammer attack. The trades have continued during the weeks he was in jail. Madam Speaker, either Paul Pelosi is the greatest investor in modern American financial history, outperforming Warren Buffett every quarter for 15 years from a hospital bed and a jail cell. Or someone else is making the trades and putting his name on them. She let it sit. Madam Speaker, tell this committee who actually trades in your husband's account. Pelosi did not answer. The silence ran for 9 seconds. C-SPAN held the camera on her face for all 9. If your hands are shaking right now, if you have ever wondered how a public servant on a public salary ends up worth $250 million while a Vietnam veteran sleeps on cardboard in her own district, comment the words 3 million to 200 million below. Hit that like button, smash subscribe. Notifications on. The next folder is the one she did not see coming. Tulsi reached for the third folder. Black. The cover was unmarked. She did not open it immediately. She set it on the table. She rested her hand on it. Madam Speaker, we will now discuss the events of July 2024. Specifically, the 11 days between July 10th and July 21st. Pelosi's mouth tightened. Madam Speaker, on July 10th of 2024, you began making private telephone calls to members of the House Democratic Caucus. The calls concerned the candidacy of President Joseph Robinette Biden, Jr. The calls concerned whether he could win in November. The calls concerned whether he should remain in the race. 11 days later, on July 21st, President Biden withdrew. She opened the black folder. Inside was a stack of phone records. She did not read them. Madam Speaker, I am not going to read the call logs. I am not going to read the text messages. I am not going to read the leaked memos from your Political Action Committee. The American public is welcome to read those documents. They are now part of the official record of this committee. She slid the stack to the side and pulled a single photograph from the folder. I am going to ask you to look at this picture. She slid the photograph across the table. Pelosi did not pick it up. The camera zoomed. The photograph was old. The colors had the slightly washed quality of 1970s film. A man and a woman stood on the steps of a church. The man wore a navy suit. He was holding a bouquet. He was 30 years old, dark hair, smiling. The woman beside him wore a white wedding dress. She was 26 years old. Her hand was on the man's arm. Behind them, on the church steps, stood the bridesmaids. The bridesmaids were laughing. The bride was looking at the camera. The woman immediately to the left of the bride, the maid of honor, was a 36-year-old woman with brown hair and a yellow dress. The maid of honor was Nancy Pelosi. "Madam Speaker," Tulsi said, "tell this committee who got married that day." Pelosi's hand shook. The pearls moved with it. "That is, Joseph and Jill Biden, the 17th of June, 1977. You were the maid of honor at Jill Biden's wedding. Madam Speaker, you were 37 years old. You had known Joseph Biden for 5 years. You had known Jill Biden for 2. The friendship between the 4 of you, Paul, Nancy, Joe, Jill, would last 47 years. Tulsi pulled a second photograph. This one from 2015. It was a funeral. Beau Biden's funeral. Street Anthony's of Padua, Wilmington, Delaware. The image showed a long line of mourners outside the church. Near the front of the line, in a black coat, stood Nancy Pelosi. She had flown from San Francisco that morning. Madam Speaker, you attended Beau Biden's funeral. You stood with Joseph Biden in the rain for 2 hours. You wrote his eulogy in part. You called him on the phone every Christmas for 47 years. You called Jill Biden your sister in your 2008 memoir, the one we have a copy of in this committee's records. Page 241. She pulled a third document. Pelosi's memoir opened to the page in question. I quote, "Madam Speaker, Joe is the brother I never had. Jill is the sister I never had. They have been my family in Washington for as long as I have lived here. They have been at every birthday, every wedding, every funeral. They are not friends, they are family." End quote. Your words. 2008. She closed the book. Madam Speaker, in July of 2024, you spent 11 days on the telephone destroying your brother. The room was absolutely silent. You did not call him. You did not visit him. You did not say a word to his face. You called his colleagues. You called his donors. You called the editorial board of the New York Times. In 11 days, you organized the political assassination of the man who had buried his son in your arms in 2015. You did not have the decency to tell him to his face. Pelosi's lip moved. No sound. Then, in October of 2024, 3 weeks before the election, your hand-picked replacement was about to lose. You sat down for an interview with the New York Times, and you said, I quote, "Had the president gotten out sooner, there may have been other candidates in the race." End quote. Tulsi let that quote land for 5 seconds. Madam Speaker, you blamed him 3 weeks before the vote, knowing that Vice President Harris was running on the unity of the party. You publicly second-guessed the man you had pushed out. And you did it 3 weeks before the election, knowing the damage it would do to her campaign. Madam Speaker, that was not strategy. That was contempt. I never wanted. I love Joe. I love Jill," Pelosi stammered. Madam Speaker, Dr. Jill Biden has not spoken to you since the 5th of November 2024. She has refused to take your calls. She has refused to attend the same events. She has not been in the same room with you in 15 months. Last January, she gave a single interview to the Washington Post. The interviewer asked her about your friendship. I am going to read what she said. Tulsi pulled the article. She did not need to look at it. Quote, "We were friends for 50 years. It was disappointing. End quote. She set the article down. Madam Speaker, past tense, were friends, was disappointing. The sister you wrote about in your memoir does not consider you family anymore. The progressive half of the gallery, the people in AOC pins and union shirts, sat with their hands in their laps. Two of them had begun to cry. Not for Pelosi, for Joe Biden, the old man in Wilmington who had been pushed out by the woman who had stood beside his wife in her wedding dress. A staffer in the third row, a young black woman wearing a Pelosi pin, stood up and walked out of the hearing room. The cameras caught her leaving. Schiff was looking at his hands. Pelosi reached for the pearls, twisted the thread, groaned audibly into the microphone. A second pearl pulled loose. Two pearls now hanging by the silk. They swung when she moved. Director, with all due respect, President Biden's decision was his own. Madam Speaker, Tulsi said, I have read Senator Schiff's text messages from those 11 days. They are part of the discovery materials this committee subpoenaed. He sent the phrase, quote, "We have to push him out," end quote, on July 14th. He sent that phrase to you. You replied, quote, "Agreed, working on it," end quote. You replied that to him at 1,117 at night on July 14th, while Joseph Biden was asleep in the residence at the White House, while Dr. Jill Biden was reading in the Yellow Oval Room, while they did not know. Schiff put his face in his hand. Madam Speaker, Donald Trump did not steal the 2024 election. You stole it from your own party, from the man who buried his son in your arms. If your heart is broken right now, if you remember when Joe Biden buried his son in the rain in 2015, and Nancy Pelosi stood with him in that line for 2 hours, drop the words, "the brother," in the comments below, spell them out, hit like, smash, subscribe. The next folder is the one America watched on live television and never forgot. Tulsi opened the fourth folder. Read. The cover was simple, State of the Union, the 4th of February 2020. Joint session. She did not pull out a list. She pulled out 4 photographs. She placed them on the table one at a time. The first was a 100-year-old black man in a wheelchair. He wore his old uniform. His name was Charles McGee. He had flown 136 combat sorties in World War II with the Tuskegee Airmen. He had been told when he came home from the war that he could not eat at the lunch counter at the airfield where he had trained. He had lived through it all. He had watched his country change. The night this photograph was taken, he was sitting in the gallery of the United States House of Representatives, watching the President of the United States announce his promotion to the rank of Brigadier General. The second was a 4-year-old black girl in a pink dress. Her name was Janiyah Davis. She lived in Philadelphia. Her mother had ironed the dress twice that morning. Her mother had taken 2 buses and a train to Washington. They had been told Janiyah was getting a scholarship. They had not been told it would be announced live on television. The little girl was sitting on her mother's lap when the president said her name. The president awarded her a federal opportunity scholarship to attend the school her mother had been on a wait list for since Janiyah was 2. The third photograph was a Special Forces sergeant in his Class A uniform. His name was Townsend Williams. He had just completed his 4th combat deployment to Afghanistan. He had not seen his wife and 2 children in 7 months. The president had arranged for him to walk out from the cloakroom and surprise his family on live television. The image showed him being held by his 2 children. His wife had her hand on his back. She was not looking at the camera. She was looking at her husband's face. She had thought he was still in Kandahar. The 4th photograph was an older man in a tuxedo with his wife. His name was Rush Limbaugh. 2 days earlier, his doctor had told him he had stage 4 lung cancer. 6 months, maybe a year. That night he had come to the State of the Union not knowing the president was about to award him the Presidential Medal of Freedom. His wife was crying when the medal was placed around his neck. His hands were shaking. He died 14 months later. Tulsi laid the 4 photographs in a row across the witness table. Madam Speaker, the night these 4 Americans were honored on the floor of the United States House of Representatives, you stood 8 feet behind the President of the United States as he concluded his speech on live television in front of 40 million Americans. You tore the speech in half. She did not pull the famous photograph of the tearing. She did not need to. Madam Speaker, I am not going to ask you why you tore the speech. You have answered that question in interviews. You have said it was, quote, the courteous thing to do, considering the alternative. End quote. I am going to ask you a different question. She tapped the photograph of Charles McGee. Madam Speaker, when you tore the speech, were you aware that one of the pages you tore announced the promotion of a Tuskegee Airman to Brigadier General? Pelosi I. Third. I had not. I had not read the speech in advance. Madam Speaker, you had a copy. The Speaker is given a copy. The Speaker holds the copy throughout the address. The copy you tore is the copy you held. Pelosi did not respond. Madam Speaker, were you aware that one of the pages you tore awarded a federal scholarship to a 4-year-old black girl from Philadelphia? Silence. Tulsi tapped the photograph of Janiah Davis. Madam Speaker, Janiah Davis is 10 years old now. She lives in Philadelphia. She attends a public charter school, the one her mother fought to enroll her in after the federal scholarship. The president announced that night was tied up in litigation for 2 years. The litigation came from the District of Columbia and Pennsylvania attorneys general, both Democrats, who challenged the executive authority of the scholarship. Madam Speaker, do you know what Janiah Davis told her mother in March of 2020, 3 weeks after that broadcast? Silence. She asked her mother, quote, did the lady not want me to go to school? End quote. She was 4 years old. She did not understand what a duplicate copy was. She did not understand what political theater was. She understood that a woman tore up the page with her name on it. Pelosi looked down at the photograph of the little girl. Her eyes did not stay there long. Tulsi tapped the 3rd photograph. Madam Speaker, Sergeant Townsend Williams, Special Forces, 4th Deployment. The page you tore included the surprise reunion with his family. Were you aware? No response. Tulsi tapped the 4th photograph. Madam Speaker, Rush Limbaugh, Stage 4, lung cancer. The page you tore included the Presidential Medal of Freedom announcement. He died 14 months later. His widow has spoken publicly about that night exactly once, in 2023, on the Mike Gallagher radio show. I am going to read what she said. Tulsi pulled a single sheet of paper from the folder. Quote, Rush watched the broadcast that night from his hospital bed. He saw the speech being torn. He turned to me and said, that woman just tore up the page that gave me a medal. Then he laughed, because he was Rush. But I did not laugh. I knew he was dying. And the woman behind the president had just torn up the only public honor my husband would ever receive from the country he loved. He never spoke of it again. But I think about it every day, end quote. Catherine Limbaugh, 2023. Tulsi set the paper down. Madam Speaker, in your opening statement today, 58 minutes ago, you called the Republican Party a death cult. You called conservative voters complicit in fascism. She gestured at the 4 photographs. Madam Speaker, a death cult does not promote a 100-year-old black veteran. A death cult does not give a scholarship to a 4-year-old black girl. A death cult does not bring a sergeant home from Afghanistan to his children. A death cult does not place a medal around the neck of a dying man. She looked at Pelosi. You did the only tearing in the chamber that night. The pearls. Fifth twist. 3 more pearls pulled free of the thread. 5 pearls now hanging by the silk, swinging visibly with each breath she took. Pelosi reached for the water glass with her left hand. Her right hand stayed at her throat. The water glass came halfway to her mouth and stopped. The hand was shaking too hard. She set the glass down. Water spilled across the witness table and pooled around the 4 photographs. She did not move to wipe it. Janiyah Davis' pink dress in the photograph slowly darkened where the water touched it. If you remember that night in February of 2020, if you watched her tear it up on live television and you have not forgotten, comment the words, "She tore it up" below. Smash that like button right now, subscribe, and turn on notifications. The next folder is the kill. It is the one she has been afraid of for 24 years. Tulsi reached for the 5th folder. It was black, with a red declassification stripe. The seal of the Office of the Director of National Intelligence ran across the front. The document inside had been classified top secret for 24 years. She broke the 2nd seal. Madam Speaker, we will now discuss the morning of the 4th of September 2002. Pelosi's face changed. The other rounds had hurt. This one did something different. Madam Speaker, on the morning of the 4th of September 2002, you traveled to the headquarters of the Central Intelligence Agency in Langley, Virginia. You were the ranking Democrat on the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. You attended a classified briefing. The briefing was conducted by the Chief Counsel of the CIA Counterterrorism Center. The briefing lasted 95 minutes. The subject of the briefing was the interrogation of a captured terrorist named Abu Zubaydah. She paused. Do you remember what was discussed in that room, Madam Speaker? I do not recall the specific. Madam Speaker, with the President's authorization, this committee has declassified the briefing log for that meeting. I am holding it in my hand. I am about to read it into the record. She held the document up. The top secret stamp was crossed through in red. Madam Speaker, I am going to read you what was discussed in that room. I am going to use the actual language of the briefing log. I would suggest you brace yourself. Pelosi did not respond. At 914 inches the morning, the CIA Chief Counsel began the briefing by describing the apprehension of Abu Zubaydah in March of 2002. He described Mr. Zubaydah's resistance to standard interrogation. He then described, and the briefing log uses this exact phrase, enhanced interrogation techniques to be authorized for use on the subject. End quote. He listed the techniques. There were 10 of them. The 10th technique was waterboarding. Tulsi did not look up from the document. The briefing covered in detail the application of waterboarding, the board on which the subject would be strapped, the angle at which the board would be tilted, the cloth that would be placed over the subject's face, the water that would be poured, the duration, the frequency, the medical monitoring during the procedure, the signs the interrogators were to watch for, the procedure for ending the session if the medical officer judged the subject was in cardiac distress. She turned the page. The briefing log records, quote, Pelosi N., ranking minority member HPSCI, present throughout duration, 95 minutes. Questions raised none. Objections recorded none. Concerns expressed about technique application none. End quote. She closed the document. Madam Speaker, the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States waterboarded Abu Zubaydah 83 times in the month of August 2002. The waterboarding occurred in violation of the Convention Against Torture, which the United States had ratified in 1988. The waterboarding was described to you in detail 1 month after it began. You raised no objection. You wrote no letter. You told no one in your party. You went home from Langley and you did not speak of it for 7 years. I was assured by counsel that the methods Madam Speaker, in April of 2009, 7 years later, when this story broke in the public press, you held a press conference on national television with reporters in front of you. You stood at a podium in this very building. You said, and I am going to use your exact words, "I was not told that waterboarding was being used. The CIA briefed us on legal opinions, not on actual practices." End quote. She pulled a second document from the folder. Madam Speaker, 6 days after that press conference, your fellow Democrat, Director of Central Intelligence, Leon Panetta, wrote a letter to the United States Congress. He had served as White House Chief of Staff to Bill Clinton. He had been confirmed as CIA Director by Barack Obama. He had no political reason to contradict you. He contradicted you anyway. I am going to read his letter. She held up the page. Quote, "The CIA records in our possession indicate that Speaker Pelosi was briefed on the enhanced interrogation techniques in detail in September of 2002. The records are accurate. The records reflect the truth." End quote. Signed, Leon Panetta. The 15th of May, 2009. The document went down. Madam Speaker, you stood at a podium in this building, in front of cameras, in front of the American people, and you lied to the country about whether you knew the United States government was waterboarding detainees on your watch. The director of the Central Intelligence Agency, your own party's director, contradicted you on the record. You have never apologized. You have never corrected the public record. You have never been held accountable. The hearing room was silent in a way that the previous rounds had not produced. This was the silence of an audience that had not, until that moment, known the full shape of the woman in the witness chair. Tulsi's voice dropped lower. Madam Speaker, you launched the impeachment of Donald Trump in 2019 on the grounds that he could not be trusted to tell the truth to the American people. The man you said could not be trusted never lied about American torture. You did. On the record, confirmed by your own party's CIA director in 2009, 17 years ago, and you have never made it right. In the front row, Pete Hegseth stood. He did not say anything yet. He walked across the well of the hearing room. He carried a single object in his right hand. It was a pair of polished combat boots. Military issue. A name tag had been tied to the laces with a piece of black ribbon. He set the boots on the well of the witness table, 6 inches in front of Nancy Pelosi. He stood beside the boots. He did not look at Pelosi. He looked at the chairman. Then he spoke. Madam Speaker, these boots belong to Sergeant Howard Liebengood, United States Capitol Police. Sergeant Liebengood had a top-secret security clearance. He read the after-action reports of the Enhanced Interrogation Program in 2007, when those reports were briefed to Capitol Police senior personnel for protective intelligence purposes. Hegseth's voice was very quiet. On the 9th of January 2021, 3 days after the assault on the Capitol, Sergeant Liebengood took his own life. 6 days before he died, he told his wife, and I quote her account given to the Department of Defense in October of 2024, "I cannot understand how the people who knew, did nothing." End quote. He did not move the boots. His widow asked me to bring these here today. She said, and these are her words, "Let her see them." End quote. I have delivered them. He turned. He walked back to his chair. He sat down. Pelosi did not look at the boots. She could not. Her eyes were on the table. Her hands were in her lap, hidden. The pearls. The thread, after 5 rounds of twisting, gave out. The silk snapped audibly. 26 pearls cascaded onto the polished oak of the witness table. The first pearl hit, then the second, then the third, then 100 milliseconds of silence, then 23 pearls all at once. The sound on C-SPAN was unlike any sound the network had ever broadcast. 26 pearls rolling on oak. Some of them rolled toward Pelosi. Some of them rolled toward the boots. 3 of them rolled off the edge of the table. The cameras caught the first one bouncing on the marble floor, then the second, then the third. Pelosi did not move for 9 seconds. Then she put her hands over her face. If you have made it this far, if you are still with this hearing, comment the word truth in the comments below. Just the one word, spell it out, hit subscribe, smash like. The closing statement is next. The standing is next. You are watching American history. You will tell your grandchildren about this hearing. Senator Cotton allowed the silence to run for 15 full seconds. Then he tapped the gavel softly. Not to bring the room to order. The room was already in order. He tapped it to mark a transition. The committee will stand in recess for 15 minutes. Madam Speaker, when we return, Director Gabbard will deliver her closing statement. You will have the opportunity to respond. We are in recess. Bang! Pelosi did not stand. Her staff approached the witness table to help her. Schiff stood, looked at her, sat back down. He did not know what to do. The pearls were everywhere. A young female aide began to gather them with both hands and a manila envelope she had pulled from her tote bag. She did not make eye contact with the cameras. The boots remained where Hegseth had placed them. Tulsi did not leave her chair. She did not pick up the manila envelope. She did not check her phone. She sat, with her hands folded on the combat journal in front of her, and waited. When the gavel struck again at the end of the recess, Pelosi was back at the witness table. She had changed her blouse. Her staff had brought a fresh one from the office down the hall. The pearls were gone. Her hair had been smoothed. The makeup had been retouched. But the redness around her eyes was visible to the cameras. She had cried in the recess room. 3 of her former speaker aides had cried with her. She was 85 years old, and she was alone in the room, in a way she had not been alone in 50 years. Schiff was no longer at the witness table. He had been replaced by her personal counsel, a private attorney from Williams & Connolly. Schiff sat in the gallery in the second row with his head down. Cotton Director Gabbard. Closing statement. Tulsi stood. She did not approach the witness table this time. She stood at the D&I table, 20 feet from Pelosi, and spoke directly across the well of the hearing room. Madam Speaker, I came here today as the Director of National Intelligence under the cross-examination authority granted by this committee. I came to ask you about an impeachment you launched in 2019 based on a whistleblower complaint that was manufactured using second-hand evidence and politically biased witnesses. 3 weeks ago, I declassified those documents. The American people have read them. The case for that impeachment, Madam Speaker, has collapsed. She paused. I did not come here to litigate your husband, or your wealth, or your speech, or your friendship with Joseph Biden, or the briefing you sat through in the basement of CIA headquarters in 2002. She paused again. But you raised the question of credibility, Madam Speaker. In your opening statement, you called me a Russian asset. You called me a traitor. You said I should be in prison. You used the credibility of your 40-year career to discredit me before I asked a single question. She turned slightly toward the cameras. The American people listening tonight are now able to weigh that claim against your husband's drunk driving with another woman in your car while you toasted in Brussels, against the difference between $3 million and $280 million on the same public salary, against the 11 days in July when you organized the political end of a man who buried his son in your arms, against the 4 pages you tore on live television because you could not bear that the man at the podium had your name on his red hat, against the morning at Langley, when you sat through 95 minutes of waterboarding briefings and then stood in front of cameras 7 years later and lied about it, and your own party's CIA director called you a liar on the record. She did not raise her voice. Madam Speaker, I am not going to call you a Russian asset. I am not going to call you a fascist. I am not going to call you a death cult. I am going to give you the only label that the evidence in this folder supports. She lifted the manila envelope. You are a public servant who became a private fortune. You are a sister who became a betrayer. You are a guardian of the Constitution who tore the Constitution's most photographed page on live television. You are a witness who lied to your own people about torture they conducted in their name. You are a speaker who ended an impeachment case 3 weeks ago when documents were declassified that proved the case was built on a lie. She set the envelope down. Madam Speaker, you wanted to put Donald Trump on trial today. Donald Trump is not here. You are. And in 2 hours, I have made the case against him in your own pearls, your husband's mugshot, your Napa winery, the veteran on Market Street, the wedding photograph from the 17th of June, 1977, the 4 pages from the 4th of February 2020, the briefing log from the 4th of September 2002, Sergeant Liebengood's boots. She paused. I quote the text on which I took my oath as Director of National Intelligence, the Bhagavad Gita Satyameva Jayate. Truth alone triumphs. Tulsi sat down. For 5 seconds, the hearing room produced no sound at all. Then the woman in the wheelchair in the back row, Serena Liebengood, the widow, stood. Her gold pin caught the overhead lighting. The veterans in the second row stood. The gallery stood. The press corps stood. Half of Pelosi's progressive supporters stood. There was no applause. Applause is not appropriate in a Senate hearing room. There was only the standing, 300 people on their feet in silence. The appropriate honor for a witness who had given the truth under oath. Adam Schiff, sitting in the second row with his head down, did not stand. Pelosi's hands were in her lap. She did not look up. Cotton waited until the standing had run its full course. Then he tapped the gavel. The committee will receive Director Gabbard's submitted documents into the official record. Madam Speaker, you are dismissed. This hearing is adjourned. Bang. The pearls remained on the witness table. So did the water on the table had dried, leaving a faint stain in the shape of a child's pink dress. C-SPAN broke its single-day viewership record by 11 that evening. The Liebengood boots image, taken by a wire photographer in the well of the hearing room, was on the front page of every newspaper in the country by morning. Pelosi's office issued a statement at 6:15 the next morning. The Speaker remains focused on her legacy work and will not respond to political theater. She canceled 4 weeks of public appearances. Her staff stopped responding to press inquiries by Thursday. Adam Schiff did not respond to reporters for 72 hours. On the 4th day, his financial disclosure was leaked to Politico. He issued a statement saying he was retiring at the end of his current term. Jill Biden tweeted one word, at 342 inches the morning, 6 hours after the hearing ended. Truth. She did not tweet again that week. Pete Hegseth posted a single photograph at 7 the next morning on the Department of Defense official account. The image was the empty witness table. Pearls. Boots. Water. Stain. There was no caption. Senator Cotton announced the following Monday that the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence would reopen the 2002 CIA briefing investigation with cooperation from Director Panetta, who agreed to testify. Janiyah Davis' mother gave a single interview to the Philadelphia Inquirer that Sunday. She said her daughter had watched the hearing. When asked what Janiyah had said, the mother answered, she said, the lady cried. She said, maybe the lady is sorry now. I told her, baby, sometimes sorry comes too late. Tulsi returned to the office of the Director of National Intelligence. She gave no interviews. The pearls were collected by Capitol janitors at the end of the day shift. 26 in total. They were placed in a small evidence bag and turned over to the Senate Sergeant-at-Arms. Their final disposition is not in the public record. There was no expulsion, no resignation, no criminal charges. There were only the records. And the records do not unredact. Did Tulsi Gabbard cross the line? Or did Nancy Pelosi finally face the exact accountability she evaded for 40 years? Has the era of untouched political elites finally reached its breaking point? Drop your verdict in the comments below. Share this debate to expose the truth. And subscribe before the algorithm takes this down.